Hey, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. I am your host, Mark O'Brien, a director at CM First Group. Thanks very much for attending. I'm looking at over 10 different time zones for today's Snack and Learn webinar on the exciting introduction of the newest member of our solution family, which is called CM evolveIT for LANSA. If you're not familiar with our format, we start right off with a poll question. And our first poll question is going to be, which version of LANSA are you currently on? And a single answer only. LANSA's earned a well-deserved reputation as a leader in production applications on the IBM I, also other platforms over the last several decades. You know, people make comments about the IBM I market declining, but as many on this webcast realize, there are still thousands of critical applications out there running businesses who want to extend the useful life of their systems. And you know, in that case, legacy means successful. I'll give you a couple more seconds here to indicate which version. And the last question there would be people might be familiar with LANSA but not currently using it in their organization. So can we see the answers? So bulk, our most common answer is 28%. And actually 32% of not currently using LANSA, but everyone's on, the majority are on 14, a few on 15, and a few on 13 as well too. Great. So let's go over, advance the next slide here. They're talking about the agenda for today. So I'm doing introductions. I'll be followed by Roger Hammer on the screen here, who's going to talk about the CM evolveIT architecture. And he's our director of products and look at the family and how the architecture fits into today's IT strategy. He'll be followed by with Dimitris Vayenas, a seasoned software and IT expert investigator on complex software systems, who will be providing some details and demonstration on evolveIT for LANSA. Some housekeeping. Please use your console that's in front of you to keyboard in any questions that you may have, and we will address them in the Q&A after Dimitris has spoken. Next slide. For those of you who may not be familiar with CM First Group, we are headquartered in Austin, Texas. We have employees in, basically in affiliate office in Amiens, France. Development centers are in Honduras and Vietnam. We are partnered with CA Broadcom, IBM, PTC, and Help Systems. We've helped over 400 enterprises since 2010, primarily on the IBM I and Z platform. And as the next slide indicates, our mission is really to provide, is basically to provide basically give the best, the most reliable, rapid, and cost-effective software tools and services to perform, optimize, and transform enterprise applications. So we have two kind of needs when we look at our customers and challenges, and they tend to be revolving on maintaining and or modernizing their applications. And I'm going to turn over the presentation to Roger, who's going to go into a little more detail about this problem and how the evolveIT architecture can deal with it.
Thank you, Mark. So yes, we help customers with both maintaining their applications and also modernizing their applications. So customers doing maintenance of these applications need in-depth analysis capability, understanding of how components and architectures fit together, and similar information for modernizing, being able to understand, particularly in the planning phases and determining the scale of an application and understanding what will go into the modernization. So the maintenance challenges specifically, you know, a lot of the budget for most IT shops are focused on maintenance, really leaving very little for new development. So many shops have significant backlogs. You know, many of them also are dealing with retirements. We're not getting any younger, many of us that work in these kinds of systems. And so finding new resources and getting them up to speed is a very important aspect. And then reducing the DevOps cycle times, particularly with CM evolveIT, giving your analysts the ability to understand the application changes they need to make quickly so they can focus on building the new functionality that is needed. And then, of course, the complexity of all the different interrelated systems that are tied into these applications. So this is our ecosystem. CM evolveIT works with source code repositories, collecting all the understanding that it needs through deep parsing processes. You'll see there support for COBOL, RPG, CA2E, and Plex, and now introducing LANSA. We use other discovery tools, runtime logs, and make that kind of information available, along with component connectivity and security and business rules kinds of information to help with modernizations. So poll question 2.
So which of the following IT challenges apply to you? So we've got 5 different options here, and multiple answers are allowed. So is it significant maintenance backlogs? Could it be retirements or scarcity of engineers, kind of a knowledge gap? Or reducing DevOps cycle times? How about understanding complex systems when they're poorly documented or the people aren't around who created them? And last, modernization of enterprise software. Now, our organizers and panelists do not vote. This is only for attendees. Okay, a few more seconds. And let's see the responses. So understanding complex systems, very high on the list. And modernization, hand in hand. Over half of our respondents are there. And about 3 in 10 want to reduce cycle time, and over a quarter, significant maintenance backlogs and scarcity. So we've got a lot of work to do to address these challenges. And now I'm going to introduce Dimitris.
This is Roger. I'm going to cover the core capabilities of evolveIT before we go to Dimitris. So I want to just share with you some of the capabilities of evolveIT at a high level, and then Dimitris will get into the LANSA specific capabilities that we're sharing today. So one of the key areas of CM evolveIT are dashboards. So we have dashboards that provide trending, code statistics, code metrics, module counts, lots of good information to help you understand that broad view, that overview of your application, and how those components fit into, the types of components fit into your application. Also, from a business perspective, evolveIT provides you the ability to begin with the menus. So starting point, providing you with the ability to look at the menus within your system and begin the analysis and understanding of all the functionality that fits underneath or is executed underneath those menu options. So giving you the ability to understand both from the business perspective and the technical perspective how this application works, what size and scope of components are used within those menu areas, and then of course showing you the information at many different levels, both text views and diagram views. So we also provide the ability for a bottom-up view, very technical view from the column and table perspective, the batch or the online, the ability to see how the files are used within your system. And I think Dimitris will share some views of this with you to help you understand that not only that top-down, but the view from the data perspective we know is very important to most of the developer analysts so that they can actually identify the parts of the application that will be changing related to the data that may be changing or added within your application. The other area we cover here is custom code search. So the ability to find information across all the source code within your system, the ability to use regular expression capabilities to find very precise information, and then to view not only which components within the application have that information, but then drill down to the code level and understand exactly where that file, that field, that particular statement is executed within the particular function. So the next area is our object browser. So this tool gives you the ability to interactively work with diagrams. So once you begin the process, you'll identify the starting points and then be able to, from those starting points, whether it's bottom up or top down, build a diagram, interact with that diagram, and be able to save it, for example, and share it with others. Also, you can export the information and relationships from that diagram, either in JSON, XML, and then, of course, drill down to the source code view for any given component within your application. So the last area I'm going to cover is the data flow impact. Similar to the idea of the bottom-up view for table and column, this functionality gives you the ability to search for fields across your full code base, run an automated data lineage analysis, and then interact with a data lineage diagram, understanding what data and what functions or modules are sending data into that particular field, and also which are accepting data. So kind of that backwards path analysis, understanding where data comes from for a field and also where it flows to. And then, of course, being able to understand where that data is, the source code that's related to it. And also, it's important to point out that we can cross the boundaries. It's not limited to within a single program or function. We're going to cross the boundaries of calling functions, data access between file reads and writes or database reads and writes, and we can search based on persistent or non-persistent data in storage. Well, at this time, I'm going to pass off to Dimitris Vayenas, and Dimitris will take us through a specific view of CM evolveIT for LANSA. Take it away.
Thank you, Roger. For many of you, LANSA is a known territory, but it is very easy to get used to it because as LANSA is actually a low-code or no-code development environment, it is a tool where somebody can download and easily, at no time, without even knowing any kind of programming or having any programming experience, can deliver full-blown web-based applications. The only thing you need to know to get started with LANSA, you just need to have the business rules and what you actually have in mind to do. Now, you know that there are many tools these days that claim to be no code or low code, but LANSA is one of the very first in this field, and they actually started 30 years ago, actually infusing, if you like, RPG and COBOL languages with templating and object-oriented, let's say, capabilities since the late 80s and 90s. Of course, we're interested in LANSA because it not only does simple applications in servers like Windows, but we can find them, we can find the solution in some extremely important solutions, such as in the banking sector, in the government sector, dealing with high-risk domains like loan management, logistics, etc. So there is need for a tool that can easily assess the adherence of the LANSA code, some of which has been developed 30 years ago, to standards and best practices as per the current data governance and compliance initiatives. Next, please. Now, what is our secret sauce? The way that we approach the solution of documenting, if you like, languages like LANSA is threefold. Of course, we have to check the application configuration, check the logs, see the data, see the tables, but the most important part for us is the model inspection of the language itself, and as well as doing some deep source analysis, that is parsing each and every line of code that actually executes in the system. All that are, let's say, decomposed into nodes and edges and relationships that we thereafter visualize using graph database technology. Next, please. Now, let's take, for example, and here I will show you a practical example of how we analyze the code into the level and the depth of our analysis. Is that, let's say on the top right, you will see the LANSA application environment. We take the line that, in this case, it says that function, the FMG, whatever, in line 308, uses this built-in function of LANSA with those three arguments to get these two fields, if you like. And what we do is, at first, we do a first pass, and we detect the function of origin and register the function of origin and the target function, as well as the type of the command. In this case, is a use function command. And on the second pass, we do a parsing of each and every parameter in the code. Therefore, we create, again, links between the parameters and the function. Okay, that means that, let's say, in the case of evolveIT for LANSA, some of the nodes, then these are example nodes that we present here, is we convert the DB schema, that is tables and views, functions, processes, columns, the access routes, the validation rules, the indexes, and the batch control logic into nodes that then we correlate, let's say, with each other using edges that one can think them as verbs, in the sense that this function calls that function, or the DB schema attributes, or if a table has access routes, etc. So I think that the best way to see and experience our work is through a demo. And we'll start with the dashboard. Well, after login, the dashboard of evolveIT presents us with some vital statistics regarding the analyzed application. These are taken both from the meta-analysis of the repository of LANSA and the actual code parsing. In this case, we see that we can see the number of functions, the number of lines, the code analyzed, and also some LANSA-related metrics, like the access route, indexes, batch control logic, validation rules, And also, because in evolveIT, we can also host a number of languages, it is important for us to present the different languages that our repository holds. In addition, there is the inherent capability that we have, so different versions of the repository can be stored in evolveIT and to be compared as per your different requirements or per different stages time-wise of your repository. Now, in many cases, your code base, I mean, in this example, we only have 200,000 lines application. But in many cases, we can have many million lines of code to be inspected. So it is a good way for us for you to see how we navigate and how we search, we make our way through applications that can run into many million lines of code. So in the left menu, you will see that for each entity, we have all these entries, and there are fields that are related to the properties of each specific object. So for example, when I'm searching for a function, I can know the group, I can search for the group, for the name. And in case that I don't know what I'm looking for, I can go to, let's say, the process, press search, and here to see the whole processes, all the processes that are available to me. Obviously, we do have type ahead functionality, as you would expect. So it is we can easily get the information that we're looking for. As Roger mentioned before, one of our key features is the search functionality of the whole code that makes it very easy for you to search the related items that you have in mind at any given time. For example, in this case, I'm searching for plant. I can see all the functions that have this code. And if I expand to any of these functions, I can see the detailed line. If I click on the icon, I will see the exact line of the code where I am, where this term, let's say, exists. Obviously, this is like a coarse searching. I mean, we think that through the graph database navigation in the graph database era, possibly these textual searches may not have much relevance soon enough. Now, one more feature that I would like you to see is the fact that we have the ability to save and store and share our graphs. So that means that from my profile menu, I can see some of the charts, some of the graphs that I have inspected, and I can access them at no time. Now, let's now proceed and analyze a reasonably sized process so that you can see the key features of the tool without much clutter. So I'm going for a process that is rather simple. It only contains 8 tables and comprises of about 10 functions. You can see the statistics in your screen. And you can see also that we have statistics like we count the number of read operations, check operations, inserts, updates, everything. Now, let's try to get to call for its graph. If I call for the graph of this function and select self, I will only see the box of the process itself. Now, if I go for the neighbor option, I will get the functions that are directly linked with this process. And if I go for the shallow option, I will be presented with the neighbors of the neighbors. So we now see the process, the direct functions, and the functions that are called by those functions, and the objects that are called by the secondary functions, be it functions or DB schema types. On the left, you will see, on the bottom left, you will see some of these labels that are not actually just labels, they are actual buttons where you can, of course, identify the items that you see on the screen, but also activate and deactivate them, so that, especially for very complex processes and charts, to remove the clutter. Okay. Now, for example, this of course applies to the edges as well. And as you see, I have a lot of turquoise-like lines that happen to belong to the function uses function relationship, which is a rather popular function instruction, if you like, for the LANSA coders, because it's the call of our user function to a LANSA built-in function. So you can consider that as when you investigate, let's say, a solution, as it can be considered as noise, if you like. Now, from the legends, you realize that the yellow line denotes a function called function type of edge. And by clicking, if I go to click on the edge of a function called function, I will be able to see not only, and that applies to every edge in the diagram, of course, I will be able to see which exact line of code and which actual instruction led to this edge and node to appear in this chart. So you see that in line 746, the first function calls this particular function. Now, let's go now for something more rare, when we do call external programs. So here we have an external program. You will see that when I press on the node, I show on the edge, I see the details of the edge. On the node, I see the details of the node. You will see that it says that the function group is a program. Language to us is unknown. Because in this demo, the installation didn't have, we haven't incorporated, let's say, COBOL or other languages for this demo. Whereas in that function, you know that is green screen, and I have categorized it as green screen is a LANSA function. Obviously, by clicking on each and every node of the function, in this case, we are able to see the full code. Okay. Now, you may think that this clean is very clean and too tidy. Well, this is so because this code is product of our own compilation, if you like, the interpretation of the original code itself, to our own format. Also, it is clean because our client decided that he wanted to use our analysis only as part of his compliance and data governance efforts. So he only needed for us to deep dive into commands that only call other functions, processes, and programs and interact with the database, either passively or actively, I mean reading data or inserting or deleting data. So we analyze code that has potential impact to the data and even the conditions set in the program, even if the conditions set in the program are overridden. So it's like a worst case scenario. And actually, this is one of the reasons that we support many multiple repositories, because let's say we can have the same repository being analyzed for different purposes. We can have a deep analysis for the developers and the DevOps, and another analysis for the risk team. Now, the feature that you see before you here is the estimation of the impact of its function based on weights that you set. For example, for conditions, you can give penalty points, if you like, for conditions. You can give penalty points for conditions such as set variables, external function calls, and DB access points. And you can get a measure of the impact of this function. Now, these measures can be for the function per se, or for the function in conjunction with all the other functions that interact with it in the process. Now, let's move now to a more realistic example of a larger process that has 27,000 lines about, and it performs, as you can see, if you can see, 489 DB reads, 44 checks, 59 creates, inserts that is, 180 updates, and 176 delete operations. It accesses 99 tables and calls 59 functions. Now, we will draw this diagram, and it will take us about 15 seconds. You may think that is too much, but if you think in terms of a conventional RDBMS database, it's because the complexity of each and every node is multiplied by the child nodes. That is to say that we have, let's say, 70 columns on average per table, then 2-3 indexes, then 2 access routes, almost 10 validation rules per table, etc. So to make a long story short, if you were to run this query that we just ran and took us 15 seconds on an RDBMS, the likely result is to get a timeout. Or at best, you will get it at over 1,000 times slower. So let's now pick something out of random, and I selected this TD schema that I was told it's been corrupted. Now, to assess the impact of this process as a whole can have to any particular component, such as this table, it is as complex and difficult as picking up this table in this diagram. So it is actually a matter of luck. It can take hours, if not days, to figure out what actually impacts a particular field or table during troubleshooting, as you know. So what we do is that we can pick the table and do and then we can do a reverse analysis of the impact of the functions that the functions of this process have to this table. In this case, we see that out of all this mess, only just 2 functions seem to affect this table. And actually, the first one, the top one, only does the checks. So the culprit in this case is bound to be the bottom one that does the inserts and deletes and the updates, what have you. So I cannot find a better argument for using a tool like ours, not only for QA and it has to be used for QA purposes. It can be used for daily troubleshooting operations, but just like for matters of compliance or data quality monitoring. Now, let's try to do now a reverse analysis and to look backwards in the sense that until now we start from a process, we went to the function, then we went to a table. In this instance, we will pick up a field, sorry, a column actually, because as you know, LANSA, there is a field level of abstraction, which is another thing from a column. So we see that for this abstraction, we have 7 instances of the field AD slot in 7 different columns in the LANSA schema. We pick one of them. And there, I press the backwards button and go for a full graph. Here is what it is. On the bottom right, you see the field, then the table that it belongs, and then the functions that can impact the function that impact the table that can impact the field. And we see actually that we have 2 processes that can potentially impact that particular and corrupt, let's say, that particular field, that particular column. Of course, on the right, I forgot to mention that, you can see all the items, and you can pick all the items that you see on the screen from the nav bar on the right. And you can select and you can see the comments, the code that actually led to the presence of each particular node. And the same thing, let's say, applies here. We have this function that is being called by another 7 functions. So if I press here, I see all the instances that the function is being called. Now, as we conclude this demo, I would like to take some time to bring your attention to the export capabilities that we have. So that, let's say, for everything that you see here, each and every object can be exported even in either in JSON or CSV format. Another part that I guess you take it for granted from a company that analyzes some complex applications, that everything you see here is, of course, role-based authentication. You can select which items will be shown to which group of your users, or let's say which users will have the ability to create, for example, business terms, which is another topic. You understand it is impossible for us to cover such a tool in an hours-long demo, but I think you get a glimpse of what it is doing. And finally, to show you the customization capabilities. I mean, you may not like the style of what you saw in the diagram. So what you can do is that for every type of node, you can change the shape. In this case, I change the shape of the DB schema box to an octagon. You can change the color. You can change various icons. So if I run let's say, just see a graph, you will see that the rectangle has evolved into an octagon. Now, the same thing applies also to edges. I haven't created a special rule here, but let's say you can pick, you can create new rules. You can pick the type of the edges that we have. As you see, there are many more than the ones we show you in the presentation, the slide before the demo. And of course, you can change the color, the style of the line, and even, let's say, the arrows. Additionally, you see below the panel that says property name, you can create custom properties. So for any type of style, CSS style that exists in our style sheet, you can override it. You can change their opacity, what have you. And here you see the diagram with the dashed lines. I think that was enough for me for a first demo. And
oh, fantastic job, Dimitris.
Thank you.
An awful lot of ground to cover, and I hope our audience doesn't feel like that they've been getting a drink out of the fire hose. But we've got a lot to show you, and you can
okay.
recap and then talk, and then we'll move on to our next poll question.
Okay. Yes. Doing a quick recap is what we would say is that this is a highly automated and accurate analysis. I'm sure our legal department will tell me that if I claim that it's 100% accurate, will be an exaggeration. But we're very confident on that, in the sense that we measure and we account for every comma, every iota of the code. The only limitation is the desire of the clients to what level they want the reporting. The second part of this FAR approach is the fact that we also analyze commands that are not registered in the LANSA repository. For example, you can have external calls to other functions, to other programs, that these are not registered in the repo. And one has to go through the whole code listing and figure out these lines. Well, we do that for you, because you cannot do that in, let's say, 10 million lines of code, as can be the case. The other thing, of course, is that we do support hybrid environments. Also, of course, yes, we detect the interaction with the DB schema. We also help you identify unused, outdated code and tables. I mean, we know cases where we have tables that we take back up, we update every day, whatever, but they're not used by our current processes and functions. They used to be used 20 years ago. And because we're insecure of not to mess something, we left them there. So with our tool, you'll be able to see what actually runs in your platform. And finally, I think most importantly, is the fact that with such a platform, we give a point of communication and common point of reference for developers, DevOps, compliance, and data governance teams. I think that concludes. And there's one more thing, if you like, that with our API, we hope and we work to integrate with platforms such as the Open Metadata Initiative of Algeria, integration with 3D visualization tools like EMA 3Ds, so there's great work, fancy graphics, and of course with other auditing platforms such as the ones offered by Palantir and others. Thank you very much.
Great job, Dimitris. We're now going to move on to our number 3 poll question, which is, you've seen an awful lot this morning from Roger and from Dimitris. So our next poll question is, which LANSA analysis feature is most interesting to you. And we've got 5 options and you need to select only one. So would it be the data lineage or data linkage? Number 2, would it be impact analysis? 3, would it be documentation or common understanding? 4 would be code search. Or was there another part of the analysis that was compelling to you? And let's see what our responses look like. This thing turned out, impact analysis, number 1 by quite a margin. Twice as common. Data lineage and documentation favored by about 1 in 5 respondents. Code search less, and other not. So clearly, people are looking at impact analysis and seeing if it's going to work for them and walk the walk for them. Not going to go into our, we already did the question, so I'm just forward to the Q&A session. So just as a reminder, we have several people who have submitted questions already, but please continue that. If you see something that you want to ask, put it in there. I will tell you that we will have written responses to each of the questions. Those that we can get to. Anything that gets submitted in this, we will respond to and follow up with a separate email following the webcast. My first question is for Roger. We have very complex code. What does the POC process look like?
Okay, thanks, Mark. So complex code, we're used to that, of course. We see lots of different code within our applications here. And so the POC process is very simple. You know, you're gonna provide your model and source code. We'll take care of all the rest. We'll complete all the parsing functionality and provide that back to you in the cloud implementation so that you can analyze directly from the web interface. So very simple process, just takes a few days to get set up, and be glad to get you started.
Great. Next question is for you, Dimitris. How long would it take to install and configure?
It will take, it depends on the version actually of LANSA that we're going to examine. I mean, if it's a version of LANSA that is, let's say 20, before let's say 12, it will may take us a couple of days to get started. And then after we get started and we do our setup for the particular client requirements, its run can be, let's say, delivered for and run and produce results in about an hour for every 1 million lines of code that we analyze. So you can even run that daily without any other intervention from your end.
Great. Hey, Roger, do you have anything to add about install and configure?
No, I think you covered mostly. I think, you know, as I said, once you provide the model and code, then, you know, we'll take care of the rest. And, you know, we provide that back through the web interface, through your own individual login. So that's key.
Okay. Next question is, for me, I'm assuming, what is your pricing model? Well, the model is based on unlimited users and the number of modules in your system. And I can give you more details in a separate discussion. Do you have any other questions coming in from the field?
I see one other question in the chat having to do with runtime. So Assume evolveIT is a static analysis tool. Certainly we can share information and you can analyze and understand elements that relate to your runtime functionality. But you know, we're not actually running, for example, performance analysis, things like that at this point. But there are opportunities there to look at logs, and if that's a need, certainly let us know and we can talk more.
If you like, I can, excuse me,
Yeah, go ahead.
Mark, Yes, I mean, look, implicitly, we can, since we have a measure of the number of reads, inserts, updates, what have you, that occur in an application, we can potentially provide support to the DevOps team about, let's say, why a particular process locks a particular table. I think up to right now, there is a division between the development teams that do develop and without actually being concerned how their code is going to run in the infrastructure. And then we have the DevOps teams who optimize the code that they taken for granted and try to make it work as best as possible, but without actually having arguments and helping the developers realize certain constraints of the database, of IBMI, whatever. I think that with our tool, we can help in this direction as well.
Right.
Okay, I'll read off. There's some additional really technical questions that maybe Roger could take. I think the features in general, this release does not have everything to do with LANSA, but we have many things, and over time that will be added to. But first question was, what about forms, server modules, reusable parts, VL_web, and WAMs? So maybe Dimitris and Roger, you can take that.
Okay, from my end, to just say that I will encourage the person to send us more details about the requirements. In this case, in the case of this demo, we opted to go for the most difficult scenario, which is to try to analyze a code base that is, I think, is 30 years old. I mean, as you understand, the more recent the version of LANSA, the more easier it is to understand because LANSA improves on a daily basis. So the challenge is actually dealing with old code rather than correlating and figuring out what's going on with web parts in LANSA 14 or LANSA 15. I mean, having done the work in a very old code base, I mean, the latest version of LANSA for us, we got them for breakfast, I think. Thank you.
So I think good point, Dimitris. I think the key point there is, we're beginning here with LANSA, and we have a very flexible architecture within evolveIT. And so we will be adding a number of these features as we go along. And particularly if you have specific needs, we'd love to hear from you so we can talk about how you want to see that information.
The next question is, I think along the same lines. I don't see nodes for web pages, reusable parts, forms, dialogues, views. Do you support these types of LANSA programs, or just the older non-RDMX green screen applications from the 90s?
Yes, we do. We also have a plan. Of course, possibly we can cover that in another webinar, where we can correlate each object with the code and the function that it acts upon it. Yes.
Okay, great. Next question. I'm altering a field in a database table. Can I detect the impact in RPG and COBOL? Maybe take that, and then that's part of the other LANSA features. I'm sorry, other evolveIT features.
Yes, so if you make a change to a field, evolveIT is built around the idea of understanding how that field is impacted within the application. So depending on whether you have RPG or COBOL or what platform you're running on, evolveIT will provide you that information to understand where that field is and how it's being impacted, where it's being read or written within the application.
Great, I think we have time for one more.
Okay. Is the XREF using the internal XREF tables in LANSA or only looking in the code?
Yes, we're using both. Initially, we do, as we actually, I think we showed that in our slide, we do monitor the repository for various correlations. And then, of course, to go into the details of it and be 100% accurate, we do analyze the code and we correlate the code, our own parsing, the outcomes of our own parser with what actually exists on the repository. And this is why it is that we claim, and it's a reality, that with our tool, you only see the actual active code, not just the code that has been registered in the repository, sits there, but never used. Okay, so we work in tandem, if you like.
Great, Dimitris. We get time for one more question. We have a few more that are coming in, and we will, like as I said, we will follow up after the webinar with answers to those queries as well.
Okay, last question. Can this platform connect to our lifecycle management repository? In this case, Rocket, Aldon, LMI. Roger, maybe that's best for you as far as.
Sure. So I think the APIs allow us to do a lot of things, and we do have automation in our cloud implementation. So certainly we'd be glad to talk to you about that kind of implementation where we can connect your current DevOps and source and model management into evolveIT.
Great. I now have the last poll question, which is called MINT, M-I-N-T. You may not be familiar with the phrase. And so M means that I'd like to have a more in-depth meeting based on what we talked about, the topics of today. I would mean that that you might not be the right person, but you can introduce someone in your organization who is responsible for looking at LANSA analysis. N is let's stay in touch. Put me on a newsletter. We have several different versions of that depending on our product lines and solution sets. And the T means that there's another audience or another group outside of your organization at work that would be interested in hearing this kind of information to another audience. So I want to thank my panelists, my fellow panelists, Roger and Dimitris, and the technical staff here for putting this on. We had, like I said, we have 11 time zones covered with our activities today. And beyond the panelists, thank you, the audience, our community here for your kind attention and especially intriguing questions on today's webcast. We will now send on a separate email a 4-question survey. It takes a minute to fill out, and then we'll send you your certificate for the lunch and snack. And we will see you next time. Thank you.